Riji was a pathetic and ugly corporate slave who was isekai'd into a magical world with no help from Truck-kun. Instead of being an overpowered hero, he was instead turned into a drug encyclopedia who managed to raise up different species of monster baddies while running a drugstore. One morning, Riji, Nola, and Mina, the house ghost, had just opened up the store when off. The general store owner came to speak with Riji. He begged him to let him sell one of his potions, which he dubbed the super potion, at his store. Mina tried to explain that it was a simple energy potion, but he ignored her and told Riji it was the sweetest potion he'd ever tasted. Riji felt uncomfortable and asked him to move away. Alf moved away and told Riji that he needed all the money he could get because his fifth kid was on the way. Riji took pity on the poor man and agreed to give him some of the potion. Alf was so happy that he began making plans to have more kids because according to him he was going to be rich. After Alf thanked them and left, Mina did some calculations and pointed out that Riji sold the potion at a cheaper rate to Alf. Riji told her he did it because he wanted to help Alf, so he didn't mind at all. A few days later, the news of the delicious tasting potion spread amongst the people in the village. Alf's store had more customers than he'd ever seen in his life, and he couldn't be happier about the turnout. Riji's drugstore wasn't left out, and he also saw an increase in the number of people buying his potions. One of the said customers happened to be a woman, who came along with her daughter to get some potion. Unfortunately, the little girl began throwing a tantrum, even though her mother and Riji tried to calm her down. Nola had to step in and distract the little girl with her tail, even though she hated it when someone touched her tail. When the woman and her child left, Riji thanked Nola for handling the situation well, which made her happy. Soon after, Mena asked Riji if he could go into town to buy some ingredients she needed to prepare dinner. Riji agreed and took Nola along with him. So as they made their way to town, the wolf girl began sniffing out some useful herbs. The next moment, they heard the sound of screaming. They noticed a young man running from a knife-wielding woman. The young man ran to hide behind Riji, indirectly using him as a human meat shield as the girl pointed her weapon in his face. Eventually, she calmed down, and while Nola kept her company, Riji questioned the boy. The boy, whose name was Cyril, explained that he and the girl, Ferris, were in a relationship. He said things were going well in the beginning, but recently Ferris had turned into a psycho stalker. He told Riji that Ferris accused him of being a two-timing skirt chaser every time she saw a girl next to him. Riji suggested breaking things off with her if he wanted to keep his family jewels intact, but Cyril told him he tried to do so before and it ended badly. He then begged Riji to help him find a solution, saying he was sure Ferris was possessed by some benevolent spirit. Riji pointed out that he wasn't one of the Pope's exorcists, but Cyril insisted that he be the one to help, so he agreed. Riji asked Cyril to come by the drugstore that evening. After they returned to the store, Riji immediately went to work on the potion for Cyril. By the time evening rolled around, Cyril came to collect the potion and thanked Riji before returning home. The next morning, he returned and informed Riji that the potion had worked like a charm and Ferris was back to her loving self. Riji then explained that the so-called potion was some nerve-calming tea which helped Ferris sleep. Cyril thanked him for his help before dropping a wad of cash on the table and leaving the store with Ferris, who was waiting for him. A few days later, Riji went to gather herbs with Nola, but she suddenly had an allergic reaction to a certain flower. Riji recognized the flower as a Utsubo flower, which produced an unpleasant smell only monsters could smell. To rectify the problem, Riji created botanical deodorant to get rid of the smell and Nulia's reaction to it. In the end, Mina suggested they sell it as a bathroom deodorant, and it became a hit amongst the villagers. Days later, Riji and Nolo went to the Rabbit Tavern to collect the food Riji had ordered earlier from the owner's daughter. After handing over the money, Riji gave her a bottle of his detergent, and while they talked, two idiots interrupted them. Nola immediately went into protective mode until someone called them off. The person who called them off was their captain, Annabelle, and she apologized to Riji for the behavior of her subordinates. Riji thanked her and left the tavern with Nola, but Daz and Mose went after them and begged Riji to deliver 5 of his energy potions to their barracks every morning for half the price. Annabelle soon caught up with them and asked them to stop embarrassing themselves. They argued that they were doing it for her sake and said they knew she usually drank 2 energy potions every night. Annabelle tried to play it off, but Riji cut in and promised to deliver the potions. However, he requested that they help him do something in return. He took them back to the tavern and handed the detergent over to them, asking them to use it and spread the word about it. Annabelle decided to test it out and was very surprised to see how well it worked. But of course, Dumb and Dumber believed it was magic. When they returned home, they had lunch with Mina and told her everything that happened at the tavern, which she found amusing. The next morning, Regi gave Nola Annabelle's energy potions and also gave her an extra one so she didn't end up drinking Annabelle's order. However, the moment she opened the door, they found Annabelle standing there, and she told them she decided to pick up the potions as she was in the area. After Nola handed the potions over to her, she thanked them and informed them that she would come pick them up herself every day. Later on, Regi and Nola went into the forest to collect herbs, but they realized that most of the herbs were finished. Regi noticed some seeds on the ground and ordered Nola to pick all the seeds she could find. He then went in search of Cyril and asked if he could make use of his family's farms to plant his herbs. Cyril immediately agreed, so Regi and Nola went to work planting the seeds they had gathered. When they were done, Cyril arrived and told Regi that he had forgotten to tell him something important about the land. After hearing this, Mina asked Regi if he had any idea how to protect the crops he just planted, and he told her he had a plan. Nola tried to go help Regi prepare his newest potion, but he insisted that she stay away and opened a bottle containing Atsubo flowers. Nola didn't stick around to find out what he needed it for and ran off. A few days later, he went to the farmland with Cyril, and as they stood by the fence they watched as a dog fainted after sniffing around. Cyril asked what had happened, so Regi explained that he'd sprayed his newest invention called Beast Repellent on the fence. Cyril was so impressed that he called Regi a magician and said what he'd created was a magical barrier. When Regi returned home, Nolia avoided him so much that Mina asked if he'd taken a bath in days. The next day, Annabelle came to the store as usual to pick up her potions, but this time around she asked for an extra box. On her way out, she bumped into Daz and Mose, who had come to speak with Regi regarding an issue that Annabelle had forbidden them from bringing up. As usual, they ignored her and went ahead to tell Regi about it. Annabelle explained that the number of bandits attacking the village had doubled. She said that during the last attack, more people were injured, so she'd been giving them her energy potions. Daz and Mose admitted that they had come to him because they hoped to pick his brain and come up with a solution. Annabelle told them that it wasn't Regi's responsibility to protect the village, but he insisted that he wanted to help in whatever way he could. Just then, he overheard Mina and Nola talking in the kitchen about onions and tears, so it gave him an idea. He ordered Dawn and Mose to go find the strongest booze they had in the barracks while Annabelle stayed back to help him. He took some peppers from Mina and went to work on grinding them until Daz and Mose returned. After they gave him the booze, he went to work, and when he was done, he presented the potion to them. The moment Daz and Mose took a whiff of the potion, they fell to the floor screaming. Regi tried to cover the bottle but accidentally inhaled it, so just like the others, he began crying out in pain. When the effects finally wore off, Annabelle and her crew left after thanking Regi. After a few days, the bandits got a taste of Regi's newest invention. Regi and the girls were going about their day as usual when a special customer walked in. He introduced himself as Ryan, a butler working for the Valgas family, and said that his mistress had requested Regi's presence. The moment the words left his mouth, Mina moved away from Regi and accused Regi of having an affair. She told him she wasn't aware that he was a sugar baby, but Regi told her to stop imagining stupid things before he agreed to go with Ryan to the Valgas mansion. At the mansion, Regi was introduced to Lady Flam, who asked him to create an ointment for rejuvenation for her. She said she wanted it to be ready in 5 days, but Regi told her it was impossible as he needed more time. Flam then asked if he'd be able to live with himself if she attended the dinner party her husband was hosting looking like Mother Gothel in her true form. Regi argued that she didn't look a day over 30 and said that she would give Snow White a run for her money in a beauty pageant. His words seemed to calm her down, but she admitted that she didn't believe a word of what he said. Regi realized that she was well aware that the people of the town gossip about her looks behind her back. It made him remember his old life, so he agreed to make her something that would make her look younger. When Regi returned home, he immediately started working on Lady Flam's request. Days later, he was done with the concoction, so he took it to Lady Flam and told her to apply it to her face every day after bathing. She took it and admitted that she wasn't sure it would work, but he asked her to give it a shot, so she agreed. The next day, Elaine Valgas, the daughter of Lady Flam, went to the store to see Regi. Mina had to ask if he decided to create a harem, with both mother and daughter in it, but Regi assured the delusional that he wasn't interested in MILFs or underdeveloped Lolas. Before he could say more, Elaine rudely interrupted them, so Regi gave her a lecture on good manners, even though she argued she had done no wrong. She then told him wanted him to make a love potion for him, but Riji refused as it was an impossible task. This made her ask what she had to do to get the attention of the young lord she liked. Since Riji didn't want to expose himself as a never-been-kissed riskless loser, he agreed to make something to help in her quest for love. When he was finished, he handed her a perfume bottle and told her it was bound to get the attention of her crush. He sprayed some on her wrist and neck and told her that if she wanted it to work, she had to fix her nasty attitude. Elaine was grateful for his help, even though she acted like she wasn't, and when Rain came looking for her, she left with him. Several days later, she returned to the shop and told Riji and the girls that she had come to work part-time at the store, saying that she had gotten permission from her father to work for 2 days. Riji tried to let the silly girl understand that he was the one she needed permission from. However, she played the cute and innocent card, so Mina suggested that she work with Nola, who asked Elaine to refer to her as Professor Nola from that moment on. Riji chose to ignore her stupidity, and they went ahead with the day's work. At the end of the second day, Elaine gifted Nola the perfume she'd made and Nola gave her a replica of her tail. Sometime later, on an extremely hot day, Elaine returned to the store and informed Riji that her father wanted him to create a potion to bring winter. After working for a while, he presented the girls with a cooling gel that worked better than an air conditioner. They all applied it to their bodies and instantly felt the chill of winter, but the girls soon fainted. A few days later, Riji and Nola were searching for herbs in the forest when Nola was attacked by a squirrel. When Riji looked in the direction of the squirrel, he noticed that it had fainted, so he decided to treat it. After tending to the poor animal, he got up and went home with Nola, not realizing that the squirrel was watching. The next morning, as Mina opened the windows, she came face to face with the squirrel, leaving some nuts for them. She took it in and showed it to Riji, saying that a squirrel had dropped them off. Nola wasted no time in stuffing her mouth with the nuts because they smelled good, and when Mina asked why the squirrel had brought the nuts, she told her that Riji had saved the squirrel's life the previous day. For the next few days, the squirrel brought an offering of nuts and Mina soon became confused about what to do with them. She couldn't cook it as they had no ingredients at home, so Riji offered to take Nola into the village to buy some. When they got there, they heard the sound of the Rabbit Tavern's owner yelling. It turned out that a fatso named Fernando was trying to get the owner to sell the place to him and start working for him. He refused and told the constipated old geezer to get out of his store, which he did, but not before he told the owner he'd wait until he came crawling. After he left the owner and his daughter, Rena explained that Lord Fernando owned a restaurant that just opened up nearby. Rena said he'd been buying out other restaurants to reduce the competition. However, they weren't ready to lose their family's beloved restaurant to a good-for-nothing Grinch. Nola tried to cheer her up by offering her some of the nuts from the squirrel, which made Rena happy. Her father took a whiff of the nuts and asked Riji if they were Rokusho nuts. Riji told him yes, and he immediately asked where he had gotten them from, as the nuts were very hard to find. He added that the nuts were the one ingredient that chefs in the kingdom longed to have but couldn't find. He said a royal chef had once succeeded in making a sauce from it, but after consuming too much of it, he died without leaving a recipe. Riji then asked the owner to let him try and recreate the sauce since he had access to the nuts, but Nola shocked them by confessing that she'd eaten all of it. They returned to the forest hoping to find either the nuts or the squirrel, but found nothing. So they decided to return after Riji left an energy potion for the squirrel. When they returned home, they were discussing what to do when they heard sounds coming from the window. They went to check it out and found the squirrel standing next to a big pile of Rokusho nuts. Happy to finally have what they needed, they thanked the squirrel, and Riji went to work on making the sauce. When it was ready, he took it to the tavern, and it instantly became a hit. Meanwhile, Fernando was walking around the village when he smelled something delicious, so like a bloodhound he tracked down the source. When he discovered it was coming from the Rabbit Tavern, he rushed in and demanded to know what it was. Riji told him to go wait in line like the other customers if he wished to find out. After a few minutes, he was given a table and served a meal with the Rokusho sauce poured on top. Immediately, he began eating and was so happy as the taste made him wish he could keep eating it forever. When he was done, he demanded to know who had made the sauce, but neither Riji nor Rena were willing to tell him, so he paid and left. However, he went to stand outside and began wondering who on earth could have created the sauce, as he could bet his entire fortune that it wasn't the owner. Just then, he noticed Riji attending to some customers and realized he had to be the one, so he approached him. He dragged him into an alley and offered to pay him if he sold the Rokusho recipe to him, but Riji refused. Nola soon came and gave him a bento of the meal he'd eaten earlier before she left with Rigi. The following day, Ferris went to the store to speak with Rigi and asked him to prepare a stimulating potion to put Cyril in the mood. She said she wanted to have his babies, but they hadn't been doing much adult aerobics as of late. Rigi tried to refuse, but when he remembered he was talking to the Queen of Psychos, he changed his mind. However, he made sure he went to speak with Cyril first to find out things from his perspective. He asked Cyril if he and Ferris were doing okay, and if they had plans on getting married. Cyril said they were and added that both their families approved of their union, so Rigi made up his mind to make the potion. When he was done making it, he left it in his workshop and went to attend to a customer. As he made his way back to the workshop, he overheard Nola offering Minna the potion to Mena. By the time he got to the door, she drank it all and was already feeling hot and bothered, so decided to give her an antidote. Before he could go get it, Mena pulled him back and tried to kiss him, but he stopped her. While he was still trying to make her understand she'd feel embarrassed later on, he heard Annabelle's voice coming from the store. Immediately, he ran out, but it was too late as Nola had also given her the potion. Both girls attached themselves to his arms, asking him to develop plot with them and become their baby daddy. Rigi quickly asked Nola to hand him the antidote, but the clumsy girl knocked the containers over. Fortunately, he was able to handle the situation, and by the next day, Mina was rolling around in embarrassment. Nola had just apologized for causing the problem when Cyril walked into the store, so Rigi convinced him to drink the potion. Unlike the girls who only wanted to bump uglies, Cyril looked like a man drunk in love. A few days later, Rigi saw Cyril and Ferris walking around the town looking very happy with each other. Days after that, Rigi went shopping and noticed the town was in a festive mood, so when he got home, he asked Minna about it. She told him it was because of the annual Hunger Games, hunting games known as the Kalta Festival. While they were still talking, an elven girl walked into the store and told Rigi she wanted to put her brother to shame. She said her name was Rurika and explained that her brother Kururu had won the game for several years, but this year he wasn't participating. She told him she wanted his help to win the game and prove to her brother that she was the next Oliver Queen. Rigi explained that no potion could correct her poor archery skills, but she didn't listen. She tried arguing with him, but gave up eventually, and that was when he noticed that her palms had small cuts and bruises. This made him feel bad for her, so he agreed to come watch her practice to know what he was working with. However, when Rigi saw how badly she did, he was convinced that even Legolas would consider her a disgrace to elvenkind. He took a look at her bruised hands once more and asked Nola to hand him the potion bag from which he pulled out an energy potion. After she drank it, she was able to hit the target, but Rigi pointed out that her skills wouldn't get her far during the hunt. While they were talking, Nola walked up to them with a bow and arrow, and the remaining sense of archer pride, Rurika, had died the moment Nola hit the middle of the target. Rigi had to make her stop to prevent Rurika from going into depression. He then encouraged Rurika to give it another shot, and this time around she hit the bullseye, but she had to get closer to do so. This made Rigi suggest that she use a short bow, but she argued that only children use them, and she was no child. Rigi had to explain his plan to her, and it seemed to be a reasonable one because she agreed to do as he asked. On the day of the hunting game, the other contestants laughed at Rurika for having a short bow. When the game started, everyone took off running into the forest, and as Rurika ran, she remembered Rigi's plan. He had given her a bag which he instructed her to open at a particular location. Once she got there, she did as she was asked, and just like magic, different monsters began coming towards her. Rurika waited until they were close enough to shoot them down, and she was very happy about it. The only problem was that the smell from the bag attracted way more monsters than she had anticipated. But in the end, she shot them all, and was named the winner of the competition with a total of 89 beasts hunted. Rurika was so happy she ran to the drugstore to tell Rigi about it, but when she got to the door, she chickened out. Nola found her sitting outside, but by the time she called Rigi to come out, Rurika had already run off. Later on, Kururu came by the store to thank Rigi for helping his sister win the competition and promised to see him soon. After he left, Mina told Rigi she wanted to go into town to do some shopping, but said she had a little problem. She explained that whenever she stepped foot out of the house, she was always transported back to the living room. He called on the village carpenter to open up the flooring in the living room and was surprised to find a trapdoor. The door led to a sewing room, and after Rigi looked around for a bit, he found a brooch belonging to Mina's family. Mina told him her mother had given it to her as a child, and Rigi theorized that the brooch was what kept pulling her back. He proved his theory by holding the brooch in his hand and having Minna step outside. Almost immediately, she found herself on top of Regi. Regi then told her to hold on to the brooch as she stepped out of the house, and for the first time since she died, Minna was able to leave the house. She was so happy that she hugged Regi and thanked him for helping her leave the house after a long time. Days later, as Regi stepped into the store, he heard Minna screaming. He found her scolding Nola, who was chopping up cabbages with so much force that she broke the knife. Nola begged Minna not to tell Regi what she had done and suggested they bring out the spare knife. Minna told her that the knife she'd just broken was the spare, making Nola feel bad, but the moment Regi stepped in, she ran to hide behind him. Minna tried to tell him what happened, but he cut off, saying he'd overheard them and offered to go buy another knife. He also took Nola along with him, but when they got to the tool shop, she tried to get him to buy her a sword. Regi ignored her and picked up the knives he needed before calling out to the shop owner so he could pay. Suddenly, a bespectacled blue-haired woman named Paula popped up from behind the counter and scared them. Almost immediately, she fainted, but after they called out to her again, she managed to get up and attend to them. She admitted that she had so much work to do and thanked Regi for creating the energy potion, which she drank every day. She said she'd been pulling all-nighters trying to fix the townspeople's stuff, but Annabelle's broken gauntlet was the most challenging one. Regi followed her into the workshop and watched as she worked on another project while she talked with him. She asked if he could make something that would help her repair things faster without them getting spoiled again. Regi thought about it for a while, then asked her to give him some time while he ran back to his store to get what she needed. He quickly rushed home, gave Minna the knives, and then went to work on the stuff for Paula's work. When he was finished, he returned to the shop and applied the concoction, which turned out to be superglue to Annabelle's gauntlet. Paula was so impressed by how well and quickly it worked that she gushed about it. While they were discussing, Nola got her hands on the glue and glued her fingers together, so Regi suggested they go home. Of course, Nola had to make things more complicated by holding onto Regi's hand and gluing him to her. When they returned home holding hands, Minna asked what happened, so Regi explained the situation to her. Nola then added that because of it, she and Regi would always be together, making Minna start having wild thoughts. Regi and Nola teased her for being a dirty-minded freak, but she denied it. Eventually, Regi went to work on something to remove the glue, and when it was finished, Nola expressed her unhappiness. But that didn't stop him from separating both of them, even though Nola cried. The next day, Paula came by the shop and Regi was surprised to see that she looked better than before. She told him it was thanks to his invention making her job easier, and then handed him a bag of money. For the next 3 days, Paula came to hang out at the store, causing Regi to ask if she didn't have any customers. Paula complained that those who visited her shop didn't buy anything and she was tired of tending to them. Regi told her it was because she didn't have any good merchandise, but Paula insisted that she only had top-quality merchandise. She invited him over to prove her point, and the first thing he did when he got there was open the blinds. Eventually, he convinced her to clean up the place as it looked no better than a junkyard. He also made shining polish, which he gave to her to shine all the merchandise in the shop, so they looked brand new. Days later, Paula returned to the store and told Regi that even though her shop looked great, she didn't have any customers. Regi assured her that with time people would come around and everything would work out just fine. Meanwhile, in the underworld, the Demon King ordered the arrest of one of his servants because he refused to give him some of Regi's energy potions. He then teleported to the front of Regi's store, but it took so much of his energy. When he walked into the store, he ordered Regi to give him a bottle of the potion for free, but he refused. He tried to force Regi by revealing his identity as the Demon King, Gyros Ajul, but that also didn't work. Regi told him that if he didn't have money, he might as well get out of his shop because he wasn't running a charity. Ajul then threatened to destroy the shop, so Regi reminded him that if he did, so he would have nowhere to make the potion he wanted. Just then, Nola walked into the store, and the moment Ajul laid eyes on her, he was struck with Cupid's arrow. After he asked Nola what her name was and she told him, he declared that she would be his bride, but she turned him down. When she told him the only person she liked was Regi, Ajul complained that he was being a cockblocker. Regi told Ajul that Nola not liking him had more to do with his ugly, riseless face than her devotion to him. He then asked Ajul to leave, but the young Demon King tried to bargain with him and promised him half of the world when he conquered it if he gave him both Nola and the potion. Regi refused and told him that his underlings deserved it more as they were the ones doing all the work. Eventually, Ajul felt frustrated by the entire situation, so he ran off. However, he returned 3 days later with a bag of money. Riji asked where he had gotten it, and he told him that the townspeople gave it to him as tribute when he threatened to destroy the village. Riji pointed out that they gave him the money out of pity, but Isekai'd insisted that it was because of fear. Riji stopped arguing with him and gave him a potion, even though he told him the money was incomplete. Isekai'd tried to refuse it, but when Nola walked through the door, he grabbed it and offered it to her. She showed him the potion Riji gave her earlier and drank it, making Isekai'd lose all the hope he had left. However, he came up with a plan and told Riji that he wanted to become his apprentice, even though Riji tried to refuse. For the next 3 days, Isekai'd did his best at the store, but every time he spoke to Nola, she acted like he didn't exist. Tired of being rejected constantly, Isekai'd asked Riji to make a potion that would help him know Nola's true feelings, as he believed she was only playing hard to get. Riji agreed and gave him a list of herbs he needed to gather for the potion. Once Isekai'd returned with them, he began preparing the potion, and when he was finished, he gave Nola to drink it. After confirming that it worked by asking her questions, he called Isekai'd into the room and told him to give it a shot. Isekai'd asked his question and was very shocked to discover Nola didn't care for him. Still, he kept insisting that she'd learn to love one day and even tried to hug her, but she slapped the lights out of him with her tail. As they watched him lying on the floor, Mina came in and drank the remaining potion, not knowing what it was meant for. Just like with Nola, they were able to hear Mina's inner thoughts and quickly realized that even though she was sweet on the outside, she was very mean on the inside. Scared that she might act on her inner thoughts and pop off on them, Nola gave her a massage, after which they cleaned the entire house and even prepared dinner just to appease her inner feelings. It was during dinner that Riji decided that he wasn't going to sell the potion to anyone, as it did more harm than good. Meanwhile, Elaine was in her bedroom brushing her hair when her father came to return her underwear that had been mixed up with his laundry. Days later, Rain came to take Riji to the Valgus mansion because Elaine's father requested his presence. Once he got there, the man told him that Elaine had been ignoring him lately and tried to blame Riji. Riji argued that he was innocent and said Elaine was behaving that way because she was going through puberty. This made him tell Riji about the underwear incident that happened a few days ago, and Riji said his reaction to the incident was probably what pushed Elaine away. The next moment, Elaine walked in and insisted that Riji spend time with her before pulling him away, completely disregarding her father. Outside the room, Riji spoke to her about her behavior towards her father. He told her that she needed to apologize and she promised to do so, which made him realize she was aware of her mistakes. Later on, when he returned home, he created a new body wash soap which he gave to Elaine's father the next day. He'd assured the man that using the soap would make Elaine love him again. After taking a bath, the Count returned and Riji was shocked to see that he looked younger and extremely handsome. When Elaine came into the room, he tried to forcefully hug her, but Riji prevented him from doing so. When she realized it was her father, she was surprised, but she was even more surprised when Riji told her father he was going to marry her. She had no idea he was only pretending that he wanted to take her away so that her father would admit his feelings. Elaine was more than happy to marry Riji, and even told her father she would elope with Riji if he kept refusing her. Riji asked her to be quiet and told her father that if he married her, he would be doing him a favor as he would be rid of her. The Count argued that Elaine was the most important thing in his life and said he would never trade her for anything. His words struck a chord in Elaine, so she jumped into her father's arms and hugged him. Seeing that he was no longer needed, Riji left the father and daughter alone to bond once more. Days later, Maina fell sick and Riji took care of her by bringing her food and feeding her when she requested it. After she ate, she told him that when she was still alive, she spent most of her time in bed because she was always sick. She said that her sickness caused a lot of problems for her family and began to cry. Riji managed to calm her down and told her that he was sure her family didn't think of her as a burden. When he left her alone, he gave Isekai'd a list of ingredients he needed and promised to let him touch Nola's tail in return. While Isekai'd was out, Riji and Mina went to the basement to see if they could find anything belonging to Mina's mother. Riji found a diary in the drawer, but it was too old and worn out for him to read what was written inside. Soon enough, Isekai'd returned with the ingredients and asked Riji to fulfill his promise to let him touch Nola's tail. Riji told him that he needed to ask Nola for permission, which he did, but she turned him down and slapped him away with her tail. After making the potion, Riji took it along with the diary to Mina. He told her that if she sprinkled it on the diary, she would be able to read it for a few minutes before it faded again. When he tried to leave, Mina asked him to stay and hold her hand as she didn't want to be alone, when she found out her mother's deepest thoughts. She then poured the liquid on the book, and a holographic image of her mother appeared and began walking around. She spoke about how her husband left her alone to take care of a sick Mina. She also mentioned that the doctors had no idea if Mina would survive or not, which made her complain. Mina felt angry at her mother's words and began to lash out, but when she saw her mother crying, she kept quiet. Her mother wasn't happy that she had died because she wished she could have lived a happier life. She also talked about the brooch and said it was passed from mother to daughter. Unfortunately, Mina never got to live to the age where her mother could give her the brooch. Her mother also said that the brooch meant that whoever gifted it hoped that the new owner found happiness. After her mother disappeared, Mina cried and hugged Rigi, as she thanked him for letting her know how her mother felt about her. Days later, Rigi and the girls, including Jill, went on a picnic at the lake, and while they were there, Mina and Nola played around in the water. Rigi used the chance to try out his newest product, which happened to be fish bait, as he intended to fish. The moment his hook entered the water, a lot of fish surrounded it, but they all ran off when a bigger fish came closer. Rigi, with the help of Mina and Nola, managed to pull it out of the water, but they were surprised to see a girl instead of a fish. Rigi apologized to her when she complained about the hook almost pulling out her tooth. He then asked her to get off Ijul. Ijul tried to intimidate her with his title, but Nola scolded him for it, so he stopped. The girl introduced herself as Vivi, the spirit of the lake, and they invited her to join their picnic, even though she tried to refuse. While they ate, she revealed that because the people stopped coming to drop offerings at the temple, she was very hungry. While they were talking, she suddenly turned into Rimuru's long-lost daughter, so they threw her into the lake. When she resurfaced, she told them that if her body temperature got too high, she couldn't maintain her physical form. Rigi then suggested she join them to fish, so that way she wasn't too far away from the water if she needed to cool off. They ended up making it a contest, and after Rigi showed Vivi how to fish, she happily supported him. When they were done, Rigi counted the number of fish each team had and declared Nola and Mina the winners. He then told Vivi she could have the remaining fish they couldn't take back home with them, but she refused. She said humans only gave things to her because they expected her to give them something in return. The only problem was that she had no powers and couldn't fulfill their wishes, so it made her feel worthless. Rigi assured her that he didn't expect anything from her and said he gave her the fish because he considered her his friend. Mina and Nola also told her that they considered her to be their friend as well. Ijul only accepted to befriend her because he didn't want to be left out. Rigi also invited her to work part-time at the store, but she refused because there was no way for her to maintain her physical form. Rigi then offered her the cooling gel to maintain her body temperature, and she gladly took it. A few days later, she resumed work at the store, and Rigi put Ijul in charge of her training, which wasn't a very good idea. Ijul tried to boss her around, however, when Nola told him not to bully her friend, he changed his mind. He immediately saw her as his ticket to Nola's good graces and promised to do anything she wanted. Later on, Rigi noticed Mina, Paula, and Annabelle discussing something, and when he approached them, they asked him to make a hair removal cream for them. Rigi made it and told Nola it was a beauty product before giving each of them, except Nola, a container full of it. The next morning, Nola tried to sneak into the kitchen, but Rigi noticed her and the cloth she tied on her tail. When he pulled the cloth off, he saw that her tail was missing some of its hair and realized she used the hair removal cream. Mina apologized for not telling him sooner, but he told her it wasn't her fault as Nola was always very curious. Nola told him not to worry as her hair usually grew fast, but Rigi told her that the cream prevented hair from growing. Nola began crying as she pleaded with him to make a remedy. She even promised not to touch any of his potions without his permission ever again, so he agreed. After making use of the hair-growing lotion he made, Nola was very happy that her tail was back to being fluffy. The following day, Vivi asked Rigi if he could make a potion to make her stronger, but he told her that it was impossible. Just then, Annabelle came into the store, so Rigi asked if she could help train the girls. This led to them attending a training boot camp at the barracks with Annabelle. She didn't go easy on them and had them running laps while Rigi watched them from the safety of the sidelines. However, Nola pulled him along with her and insisted he train with them, even though he looked like he wanted to die. Because he was lagging, Annabelle smacked his buttocks, causing him to scream and fall flat on his face. Soon after, both he and the girls, except for Nola, collapsed on the ground because of how exhausted they were. Unfortunately, Annabelle wasn't done with them, and she insisted they all do some push-ups. Regi immediately decided he wasn't ready to die and tried to sneak away, but Vivi pulled him back. When Annabelle found out what he was planning, he told her that he only wanted to return home and make something to boost muscle growth. Annabelle thought it was impossible, but Regi assured her that he could do it, so she allowed him to go. A few hours later, he returned with the potions and thanked the gods he'd been able to avoid Annabelle's wrath when he saw Vivi and Mina lying on the floor. He gave Annabelle a bottle and explained that it only worked on those who didn't already have muscles, so Nola drank one. She tried to flex her muscles, but nothing happened, so Regi explained that it didn't work that fast. However, he soon swallowed his words when Nola suddenly grew muscular and developed a deep voice. He was still trying to figure out what went wrong when he noticed Mina was just as muscular as Nola. Both girls began to flex their muscles, and Regi told Annabelle that whoever wanted to drink the potion had to mix a few drops of it in water. Later on, after the effects of the potion wore off, Regi and the girls returned home, but he had to carry Vivi all the way because she had passed out earlier. The next day, Egil asked Regi for some tips on how to get Nola to stop hating him. Regi asked him to give him a few minutes so he could speak to Nola, and when he asked if she hated Egil, she told him she didn't. However, she admitted that she instinctively didn't like some things about him and said that the way he smelled made it worse. She added that compared to Egil, who smelled like Shrek's swamp, Regi smelled like heaven. Her words seemed to give Regi some sort of idea, because he went to create a potion with his blood mixed in it. When it was finished, he gave it to Egil and told him to sprinkle it in his food for the next week if he wanted it to work. He said that the purpose of the drug was to introduce his genes into Egil's body and hopefully change how he smelled. 1 week later, Regi conducted a test to see if the potion had worked on Egil. Nola was blindfolded and asked to sniff out Regi. At first, Nola was unsure about who was who, but eventually she figured it out and revealed that Egil was panting like a dog in heat when she got closer to him. Egil admitted that having Nola so close to him made him extremely happy. He then tried to hug Nola, but she slapped him away with her tail before he could get close enough. Regi had to speak to Nola and asked her to try and be civil with Egil, so she agreed to do so, making Egil feel like he was on cloud 9. As the weeks progressed, Paula made it her duty to stop by the store almost every day during lunchtime to make sure she ate with Regi and the girls. A few days later, Mina asked Regi to go check up on Paula, as it had been a while since she came around. When Regi arrived at her place, he found her studying, so he asked if she had an exam to write. Paula explained that she had to take a test to be able to renew her item identification license. She told him that if she failed the test, she had to close down her store. However, she admitted that no matter how much she studied, she couldn't even pass a trial test. She then begged him to create a potion that would ensure that she passed the exams at all costs. Regi tried to refuse, but as usual, he gave in to her pleas and agreed to make some time for her test the next day. When he returned home, he enlisted the help of Nola and Mina to create the potion, and when they were finished, he had Nola deliver it. While she was out, Regi explained to Mina that the potion would help Paula remember everything she read for the next 24 hours. Several days later, Paula came into the store and showed them her new license, which earned her congratulations from everyone. Days later, while Vivi was applying her cooling gel outside, she noticed her skin wasn't looking very good. When she went into the store, she told Mina she wished her skin was as clear as hers, and Regi pointed out that Mina was a ghost, so she was bound to have fair skin. Mina then asked if he could make something to protect Vivi's skin from the rays of the sun, and told him that if it worked well, they could sell it. Regi agreed and went ahead to make some sunscreen, which he gave to them. As soon as they applied it to their bodies, they went outside to test it, and they let Regi know that it worked, well as they couldn't feel the sun directly on their skin. Nola soon came out and asked Regi if she could also try out the new product, so he gave it to her. While she was inside, Vivi asked Regi to touch her cheek, saying that the sunscreen had made it smooth and squishy. Regi decided to humor her and was impressed by how soft her skin was, but before he could carry on, Nola stopped him. She insisted that he touch her cheeks as well, and he did so until Egil came out. He tried to touch Nola's cheeks as well, but she ran away from him, so Regi had to talk some sense into him. After a few days, word spread around town about Regi's latest product, and everyone came to buy it. A few days later, Elaine came to the store to invite Regi and the girls to a party she was throwing at her family's mansion. After she left, Mana suggested they get some fancy clothes to wear for the party, but Regi said he didn't need to dress up. Nola soon joined the conversation, and both girls insisted that he wear something fancy, so he agreed. Ijul burst through the door and announced that he'd be the one to pick Riji's outfit. He told them Elaine had also extended an invitation to him, and he would be happy to instruct them on how to properly behave at a fancy party. When he said Riji would have to act like his underling, Nola beat him up using her tail. This knocked him out instantly, so both girls picked him up and took him to the living room just as Dawes and Mose came in asking for Riji's help. After they settled down, they explained that they had also been invited to the party but had a serious problem. It turned out that Dawes was a lightweight, and he was afraid that he'd embarrass himself before Annabelle like he'd done once before. They begged Riji to make something to help him overcome his problems, so he agreed to help them, and they thanked him. After they left, he began working on it. Soon after, the potion was ready and Riji gave it to Nola to deliver to Dawes at the Red Cat Barracks. While she was away on the errand, Mina managed to convince Riji to dress fancy for the party and went to find some old clothes in the basement. The only problem was that the clothes were stained and badly damaged. However, Riji came up with a solution by creating a dress cleaner, which he told Mina would restore the clothes once she used it on them. Meanwhile, Belial, Ijul's servant, was busy putting up missing posters of his around the village when Paula approached him and told him she knew where Ijul was. By the time Nola returned to the store, Mina was dressed up in her fancy clothes, and she told her Riji was getting dressed as well. Both girls then walked into his room until they saw his bare chest. They quickly shut the door and told him they would wait for him to finish after apologizing to him. When Riji was done, he came out to show the girls his outfit, and while they complimented his looks, Ijul joined them. The next moment, Paula arrived with Belial, and after Mina gave her some rice cakes, she left. Riji then scolded Ijul for leaving home, without letting Belial know his whereabouts, so he apologized. Belial was impressed by Riji's ability to control Ijul, and he made sure to tell him that he was on the same level as a great demon king, since managed to keep Ijul in check. Sometime after Belial left, Riji retired to his bedroom and fell asleep almost immediately. He dreamed of his former life and how much he hated everything, to the point where he always prayed to get away from it. One day, his wish was granted, and he found himself in another world. What was even more surprising was that he knew herbs and plants he'd never seen before in his life. While he walked around the forest, he found an injured wolf with a bag of potions beside it. But when he tried to administer the potion, it refused to take it. Riji soon discovered it was because it smelled horrible, so he quickly created another one and gave it to the wolf. Almost immediately, the wolf became well, and it transformed into Nola, who thanked him for saving her. When Riji tried to leave, she insisted on going with him, saying she would remain at his side forever. Back in the present, Riji did as she instructed, and together all three of them left for the party, forgetting about Ijul, who showed up at the store later on. At the party, they were welcomed by Elaine and her parents, and her father let Riji know that there were a lot of young ladies hoping to meet him. Riji found himself surrounded by young ladies trying to get his attention. Ferris and Zyril were also at the party, but as expected, Ferris tried to murder Zyril when she found him talking to another girl. In another part of the ballroom, Dawes was drinking so much beer because he couldn't get drunk, which was very surprising to Annabelle. The next moment, Elaine's father called everyone's attention and introduced Karuru. Meanwhile, Ijul was outside the gates lamenting the fact that they didn't let him in because he was late. To cheer him up, Belial suggested they have their very own dance party outside. Back inside, Nola and Mina dragged Riji to the dance floor, and as they danced, he felt very happy that he got the chance to live a happier life. That's it for today's video. If you like anime recaps like this, then watch this video right here.